Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 135. In today's episode, I'm so excited to be interviewing one of my coaches, Dr. Robin Pfaff, about her new book, which was just published on May 14th. Her book, Living Your Best Life with Fibromyalgia, a compassionate approach to reclaiming your health and reimagining your purpose, has two specific things that I think make it really powerful. First of all, the real power comes when you take the time to participate in the activities, reflections, and exercises given. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know I am all about the practical, how do we implement this information? And Robin's book is no exception. When you're able to engage with the reflections and the activities that she provides at the end of each chapter, you can cultivate a deeper understanding of yourself and really take meaningful steps towards a fulfilling life, despite the challenges of fibromyalgia. The other thing that I love about this book is that Robin is not advocating that we ignore our fibromyalgia, that we pretend that our trauma doesn't exist, or only think of happy things. This is not a toxic type of positivity that you so often see and hear. Instead, Robin gently coaches us on how we can embrace the full spectrum of emotions and experiences so that we can foster genuine healing and resilience. In the book, she encourages us to take the difficult, the traumatic, and the painful things that have happened to us and use them. Use them to create a life that is gorgeous, a life that's worth living, and, dare I say, a life that is even better than before. Now, let me introduce you to Robin. Robin was diagnosed with fibromyalgia almost 30 years ago. After working 25 years as a licensed psychotherapist, she became a national board certified health and wellness coach and certified fibromyalgia coach. Robin loves working with her fibromyalgia clients, especially professional women ages 50 and better, and seeing them blossom with a renewed purpose in their lives. She honestly considers fibromyalgia coaching to be a highly effective and unique treatment option that provides a comprehensive, compassionate framework for women to regain their health and learn to love their lives again. With her background in psychotherapy, Robin has a special expertise in helping women recover their lives from the anxiety, grief, loss, and trauma that often accompany fibromyalgia and help them move through post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth. And she has helped dozens of women find hope and healing. Robin's latest book, Living Your Best Life with Fibromyalgia, explores her signature holistic perspective that carefully guides the women she works with into improving not only their physical well-being, but also their emotional, social, and spiritual wellness. This book, the Kindle version, the paperback, the audiobook are all available on Amazon now, and we will have links in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/135. As always, I want to remind you, of course, the information that we include in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical advice, and it is not intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician, therapist, or other healthcare provider. Here's my interview with Robin. Welcome, Robin. I'm so excited to have you here, and congratulations on your new book. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tami. Thank you for having me here today.
Awesome. Well, I just read your official bio to everybody, but let's talk a little bit about your story. You have fibromyalgia. A lot of your book, if you guys, if you get her book and you read her book, you will hear a lot of her story. And it's not just fibromyalgia that led you here, right? So
Right.
I would love for you to just share like a nutshell version for people who don't know you, haven't read your book yet.
Sure. Yeah. It's been close to 30 years now that I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And before I was a fibromyalgia coach, I was a psychotherapist for 25 years. So I've been working with women, helping them heal from trauma, really my whole career. And what led me to finding you and finding fibromyalgia coaching was that we had moved from southern New Mexico to Denver to be near my middle daughter and her family. And I was looking for a way to work from home so I didn't have to commute to a office building. And I had heard about health coaching, but I didn't really know if there was a way, if I had anything to offer. And then I found out about the Well Coaches study on the impact of health coaching on fibromyalgia patients.
Mhm.
And they got fantastic results.
Yes.
And I talked to you and I learned that you had a training program for fibromyalgia coaching. And so I signed up for both the Well Coaches training and your training. And it's been going on 6 years now that I've been a fibromyalgia coach.
I'm laughing because I'm like, wait, what?
I know. It went so fast, right?
It totally did. Of course, we had, 2020 in there. That was like
The
this black
pandemic.
hole, but
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
oh, but that's amazing. Oh, I didn't realize it had been so long. So that's awesome. And how has that changed things for you? Doing this kind of work instead of what you were doing before?
It changed everything. It's allowed me to work into my late 60s. I'm going to have my 68th birthday this summer. I never expected to be having a thriving coaching practice at this stage of my life, but I'm finding that this is my mission. I work primarily with women who are 50 years and older who want to feel well as they're going into their 50s, 60s, and even 70s. They don't want to spend those golden years on the couch, and they have the time and the resources often to really devote to themselves. So I feel like it's given me like a next chapter in my life that I never expected to have. And my own health is so much better because of everything I learned from working with you and from working with my clients. It really keeps me on my toes. And it's been a true blessing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I know anyone listening to this podcast that's been around at all, you will have heard me say this, but I feel like coaching is like my secret, not so secret weapon, right?
Yep.
For
Yep.
keeping my fibromyalgia in remission, because it keeps me thinking about the things that I need to do. And I'm
Exactly.
talking about it all day, every day. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. And so we have to walk our talk,
Yep.
and it's motivating, and it's also inspiring because we see our clients getting better, and that encourages us to take extra good care of ourselves. So it creates a positive spiral where often
Yes.
when we first talk to our clients with fibromyalgia, we're finding them in a downward spiral where everything is going wrong and they're trying so hard to feel better and nothing is working.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for people who aren't aware, let's just pause for a second and talk about the difference between psychotherapy and coaching, because you've done both. You've been
Mhm,
on the receiving end, I'm sure, of both.
mhm.
How would you describe the difference between the two?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of overlap because both are personal growth helping type professions. But I think one of the differences is that psychotherapy is focused on healing the wounds from the past in general. And in general, coaching is focused on your goals for the future. And it's more proactive, it's more, as I said, future focused. And they actually complement one another. I have a
Mhm.
number of clients who have me as their fibromyalgia coach, but they also still see a psychotherapist for personal work, healing from trauma, for marriage counseling, for family therapy. Um, they can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And same thing here. I've had clients with both, and in many ways those are the clients who do the best
Yes,
because we need both things, right?
yes,
I mean,
yes.
fibromyalgia, we develop it usually almost always because of some kind of trauma, whether that was, getting sick with COVID or a car accident, and a lot of times there's trauma that goes with the trauma.
Right. That's right. Well,
Yeah.
it's traumatic in itself to have a chronic illness
Yes.
because it totally undermines our identity and our sense of purpose in life.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that to access both types of healing modalities.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And one of the things that I have loved about your book, I think everyone listening should go out and get a copy because it really is an important piece. This piece that we're talking about right now about healing that past trauma, the trauma of having fibromyalgia, learning how to be nice to this body that doesn't always cooperate.
Right,
Right.
right.
And we hear negative voices, our employers, our spouses, friends who don't understand that when we miss deadlines or forget things or can't do something, it's not because we just don't care.
Right. Right. People
Yeah.
don't understand how much work it requires just to function daily when fibromyalgia is not managed well.
Mhm.
And that misunderstanding can be very painful.
Yeah, yeah. And in your book, you talk about you went through quite a journey learning a lot of these self-compassion,
Mhm.
looking at your life and yourself a little bit differently. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because that's a
I
huge part of
do.
how this book came to be too.
That's right. That's right. The title of the book, I don't know if we've mentioned that yet, is actually Living Your Best Life with Fibromyalgia. But probably the subtitle is really the heart of the book. And the subtitle is A Compassionate Approach to Reclaim Your Health and Reimagine Your Purpose. And that compassionate approach that I use is based on the work of Doctors Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer, who wrote the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And this is a empirically validated approach to using self-compassion to help with all sorts of things. But the research has found that people who have high levels of self-compassion manage their chronic illnesses much, much better than those who do not practice self-compassion. And so I learned about this approach in a continuing education class many years ago. And we learned how to write a self-compassion mantra, which was based on the three pillars of mindful self-compassion, which first of all is self-kindness, learning to treat yourself like a friend, which is something that you cover so beautifully in your book, Take Back Your Life. And then the second component is that mindfulness, being present in the present moment. And then the third component is our common humanity, which refers to the fact that everyone suffers. I mean, it's just part of being human. We don't get through this human experience without experiencing difficulties. And so this self-compassion mantra that I learned started out with, this is a moment of suffering. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I realize I'm not alone. And so we practiced that in this workshop I was at. And then later that week, I can't remember what was going on, but there was something troubling me. And that mantra popped into my head just spontaneously. I said to myself, this is a moment of suffering. And I took that moment of mindfulness to recognize that whatever was on my mind at that moment was hard and that I wasn't alone. Everyone on this planet struggles and suffers. And that's when I knew that this was something really important because it had sunk down into my subconscious and it popped up when I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of my clients, we do a little mini self-compassion retreat online as part of their coaching program. And it's always a highlight of their coaching program and often turns things around for them. It becomes a game changer.
I love that. That's amazing. And the thing that one of the things I really love about your book is that what you're describing here is the way I think I have always been. And because of that, something that isn't very easy for me to teach, right? Because it wasn't something I had to really learn. Like I can look back as a kid and, think of times when I was this way for myself. But how do
Uh-huh.
you teach something that you never actually had to learn or struggle with? That's a harder thing to do. So thank you for
Right.
your book.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'm so thankful to Doctors Krista Neffen and Dr. Christopher Germer, because they're the ones that did the hard work of actualizing it and defining it and figuring out a way to teach it, as you
Yes.
mentioned.
Yes, yes. So for the person who's listening, who is thinking, okay, this all sounds nice, but you don't understand my life,
That's right. That's
what
right.
would you say to them?
I would say, I want to hear about your life. Tell me about your life, because we all have a unique journey. And one of the things that my clients, I'm sure you experience this too, Tami, always tell me is sometimes I'm the first person or you are the first person they've ever talked to that has actually gotten better with fibromyalgia and actually knows a way forward.
Yeah.
And at the same time, understands all the suffering that can go along with a diagnosis like fibromyalgia and trying to figure out how to live with all of these symptoms over the long haul. And so I would just say, let's have a conversation. Tell me what's going on in your life. In one of my newsletters, and I think I share part of this story in the book, one fall I was in Target, and it was during the holiday season. And so I had a big long to-do list. I was trying to tick things off my list. And I'd also developed chronic lower back pain, which is part of my story about writing this book. It isn't caused by fibromyalgia, but fibromyalgia amplifies it. It takes those symptoms and turns up the volume on it. And so I wasn't sleeping well, and I was kind of crabby, and I was in this line in Target, and the cashier was a woman who, she looked really lovely. She was having a conversation with each customer. And then I noticed she was she was processing their order with just one arm. And one arm was hanging loose at her side. She couldn't use it. And I wondered, she had a sleeve on it, a compression sleeve. And I
Mhm.
wondered if she'd had a stroke. And then she also had very, very, very short hair, like it had been shaved, and a flat chest. And then it made me wonder if she'd also had breast cancer. But so she was moving really slowly, but she was saying to the person in front of me, yes, it takes me a little longer, but she was just so pleased to be alive and to be working and to be providing a service. And it was such an object lesson to me from the universe that even when we are suffering, there are things to be grateful for. And that's something that we can learn.
Mhm. And what a lesson in that moment too, because you're probably standing there in line in pain, cranky. Why can't this woman hurry up?
Exactly. It was a big lesson to me to slow down, to check in with myself, with my own mindset, to be grateful and to be compassionate to her, but also to myself.
Mhm.
And sometimes I've found that people um, kind of dismiss this concept of self-compassion because they think it's that they'd be just giving in. If they showed themselves compassion, then they would never get a single thing done in their lives. But it actually doesn't work that way. with fibromyalgia, we're stuck in kind of a fight or flight mode. Our bodies are on high alert. And by offering ourselves self-compassion, we calm that down because we're basically saying to ourselves, it's okay. You're doing the best you can in this moment, and you're safe in this moment. Even saying that right now kind of calms me down because I'm a little bit nervous doing this podcast interview.
Right.
And so recognizing that safety, recognizing that I can show myself compassion even in the moment that I'm talking to you, calms my body down. And so when the people that I work with get an experience of doing that, it's an aha moment. It's an awakening for them. And then they start getting really curious about, well, what other ways can I show myself self-compassion? How can I integrate this into my life? How can I practice more mindfulness? How can I recognize that I'm not the only one suffering, that it's part of the human experience? Powerful.
It is. It really is. And, it doesn't change the actual pain, right? Like the pain from a bad back or pain from even fibro pain, but it does calm down all the extra that gets added to it. It
Yes.
turns that volume knob back down a bit, and our experience of the pain goes down.
Right. Our suffering, our unnecessary suffering, we
Yeah.
can turn it down because we already have enough that we're dealing with. We don't need anything extra to be burdened with.
Right, right. Now, one of the things that's been, talked about a lot in the last few years is toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I really love about this approach and, just listening to the mantra, right? Like we're not ignoring suffering. We're acknowledging the suffering and choosing to find things to be thankful for, to be grateful for,
That's right.
choosing to be positive.
That's right. It's like we join ourselves or we join another person down in the pit where we are. Like I said, we meet you where you are, but we don't stay there. We also know we have a ladder, a way of strategies and toolkits to walk ourselves forward so that we're not stuck in that negative cycle.
And you give practical ways to get out of that negative cycle, which I also appreciate.
I do. Did you see we have a visitor here?
I did. For those of you who are listening, one of Robin's cats is stretched out on her desk. So if you're not watching on video and you like cats, you can go find our video.
That's my cat, Layla. She walked all around the computer and then she sat down. So we'll see if she behaves or not.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness. So one of the things I wanted to talk with you about here, because I think so many people are just so curious about it. So many people want to write a book, right? Only 3% of the people who want to write a book actually write one, and only 3% of those actually publish one. So you are in a very elite crowd there. And so everybody is always really curious about the actual book writing process. And I think probably even more so writing a book as somebody with fibromyalgia, right? Because now it amplifies that too.
Right. That's right.
So I would love for you to just share your experience, your journey with, when did you think about when did the book idea come to you, and then take us on that journey?
Well, you were part of the initial ideas, the initial gleamings of the book. It was like over 2.5 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
And I was working with you and Steph Gold in a business coaching program. And I said, I want to write a book. And so you two said, well, great. And so we started working on the outline together. And I got really bogged down because my first vision of the book, I wanted it to do a really deep dive into all of the research that supports mindful self-compassion and how and its positive impact on chronic illness. And I wanted to share lots of stories from my clients and my own personal story. I had a really complex vision, and I just got stuck. And so, and then what happened during those initial months of working on the book, I was doing a lot of sitting at the computer. And that's when I started to develop this inflammation in my lower back. My SI joint became inflamed, and I have some degeneration in my lower vertebra and a partially slipped disc and a bunch of other things. And it took a long time to get a diagnosis. It took a long time to get treatment. So initially, I was trying to write the book while I was struggling with an additional level of pain on top of my ordinary fibromyalgia symptoms. And so what happened is it kind of took me back to the beginning of where I was with my fibromyalgia when I first met you back in 2018 and started the training program. My fibromyalgia was not well managed then, and you helped me figure out some supplements that made a big difference in my sleep. And I was dealing with some extra pain issues then too, and my pain specialist was able to find some treatments that worked, but this time nothing was working. And so it set me back again in the same place that a lot of our listeners are at, where they've tried all sorts of things. They've read all the articles in the books, and they're just getting confused. So at that point, I am in my email box, I found a notice for a class called the Compassionate Writer, and was being offered by Heather Doyle Fraser, who also runs a publishing company called the Compassionate Mind Collaborative. And so I did her course through Well Coaches, and then I went ahead and did like a 3-hour consultation with her, taking the outline that you and I and Steph had worked on to see if she could help me find a way forward. And so I started working with her as my book coach, but it was very, very rocky for me because I was working with my clients and sitting during those calls and sitting trying to write the book. It was just very, very up and down. And I probably quit writing that book 3 or 4 more times. And every time I would say to Heather, I can't go on any further. And we finally came to a meeting of the minds and realized that I needed to take a different approach. And I talk about that in the introduction to my book. That original book that I was trying to write just refused to be written. The book that is available now is a conversational book. It's really a love letter to everyone with fibromyalgia, especially my clients who allowed me to tell parts of their stories. And it's conversational in tone, like my newsletters are. People are telling me who have read the advanced copies that it's like sitting and talking to me, which is exactly what I hoped that it would be. So it was a lot of months of more, rough drafts and revising, and Heather kept pulling it into shape. And finally, we had a completed manuscript in December, and she said, well, we could publish in May. And I said, oh, May is Fibromyalgia Awareness Month. I would love, love, love to publish it in May. And then I came back with all these revisions that I wanted to make. And she said, well, you can make all these revisions, but you can't publish in May. And so I said, fine, this is good enough. And so we've been in the publishing phase these past few months, and it was available on May 14th on Amazon and other places where you can buy books.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When I was writing my book, Take Back Your Life, the only time I ran into writer's block, as we call it, was when I did a very similar thing. It was when I was writing the chapter on pain, and pain is so complicated, and there's so much science behind, all of that. And I started going down this rabbit hole, feeling like I needed to write that book.
Yes.
And I had kind of a similar experience, and just meditated on it and a bunch of other things, and came to the conclusion that that wasn't the book I was supposed to be writing. That was like I
Mhm.
was trying to rewrite Dr. Ginevra's book, for
Yes,
instance,
exactly.
right? And that's not what everyone is here to hear me talk about. They can always go buy her book.
That's right. That's right.
And so, yeah, and I think writing too, there's something about both just the process of writing, but also the process of writing something that everybody else is going to read, right?
Mhm.
Writing something public that's
Yes.
like undressing.
Yes. 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 There's a real vulnerability to it. And so you have to make a lot of choices about how much do I share? How deep do I go? How much of this is my story? How much of it really belongs to someone else? So those are a lot of decisions that have to be made. But I had some feedback from one of my early readers who said that she could just see herself in my story, even though the details were different, the same feeling compelled to push myself. I mean, don't we hear this from just about every single person that we talk to? Fibromyalgia people want to do all the things all the time, and we will do that for as long as we can.
Yes, indeed.
And then we have to learn how to do things differently. And that's
When our
basically
bodies
that.
are like, yeah, no, we're not doing
No,
this anymore.
we're not doing this anymore. And really, that sums up my book pretty well. What do you do after you can't push yourself anymore? Yeah.
Right, right. Oh, so true. So true. So, for the person out there who might be thinking about writing a book either about their story or fiction or anything else, especially in a fibro body, any advice you have for them?
Um, Count the cost, figure out what your big why is, your big motivator for why you want to do it, because you're going to have a big motivator to see it through. That's probably my biggest advice. And then also realize people want to hear your voice. They want to hear your story. I know when I'm reading books on chronic illness, I don't want to hear the theory. I want to hear, how did you figure this out in your actual life? What
Mhm.
did you do after you came home from your diagnosis, your surgery, your health crisis? How did it impact your relationships? That's what people want to know. They want to know, how do you live your life?
Mhm. Particularly if you found ways to come to terms with it, find ways to
Right.
feel better, like
Yes,
all of that hope piece of how can I have
absolutely.
some of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think people do feel a lot of hope when they see people like myself, people like yourself, and all of our other coaches who definitely we struggle. We have to pay attention to our fibromyalgia all the time, but we also live our lives. We do the things that are most important to us. Now, we can't do every single thing that catches our fancy. We can't. And
Right.
that's where I encourage people to go deep, not wide. Because if we try to spread ourselves too thin, then we're not going to be good at anything. But we can learn how to manage our energy to do the things that are our priorities, to do the things that we're called to do in our particular season of life. We can figure out how to do that. And that's what actually makes a worthwhile life. It's not running around doing all the different things, because that's crazy.
Right, right. One of my favorite quotes, and I won't quote this exactly, so this is a paraphrase, but Steve Jobs talking about Apple said something about being just as proud of the things that they don't do as they are of the things that they
Yes,
do, because
yes.
you can't do everything.
And that reminds me of one of your mantras. You say, no so you can say yes to something
That's right.
else. That's such an important principle. It's made a big difference to me in my life as well.
And that's how
And
you get to write a book, right?
That's right. And I do want to let people know that you wrote the foreword to my book, which puts fibromyalgia in a really helpful historical context. I mean, fibromyalgia is not new. It's been around for millennia. It's one of the things that are part of the human condition for some people.
Mhm.
And it's high time that it's getting the research dollars and the attention that it needs.
Mm-hmm. Yes. People don't realize how many people fibromyalgia actually affects. And it's actually 7.7% of women, which is 1 in 13 women, which is the same exact number as women who are affected by cervical cancer, and almost as many as breast cancer, and twice as many as colon cancer. And the reason I bring those up, I just talked about this in a different podcast on somebody else's show. But the reason I bring this up is because every woman every year gets a mammogram and a pelvic exam. And, after a certain age, we're screened for colon cancer. But your doctor doesn't even know how to diagnose or treat fibromyalgia, and it affects that many women.
That's right. And they don't know how because they're not taught, because
Exactly
the
right.
research isn't there. And so the training isn't available for our healthcare professionals. It really is, it's a crime that this is our situation with our illness. And that's why the advocacy work that so many people are doing and bringing awareness to fibromyalgia this month is so, so important.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's also why it's the work that you and I do is also so important, because somebody has to fill that gap,
Mm-hmm.
right? If your doctor doesn't know, then what? Well, there are people out there who do know and can help you.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We fill an important gap. We're an important part of our client's healthcare team. And in fact, that's one of the tasks that all of us as coaches do, is help our clients put together their healthcare team. I used to be embarrassed as to how many different practitioners I saw until I started working with you. And then I was proud. I was like, oh, good. I have all of these different people on my healthcare team.
I have a
But
nice
sometimes
big team.
I do. But a lot of people don't realize that they need to have a whole variety of practitioners. And sometimes it can be challenging to find those. And so that's one of the things we do as coaches, is to help people figure out and go through that process of finding the right people that can help them.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Because especially if if your doctor doesn't know, and you're experiencing fibromyalgia, but you don't know how to treat it, how do you even know if the person that you're thinking of seeing is a good choice or not? And that's really where we can step in and give some good assistance there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, your book, the subtitle, Living Your Best Life with Fibromyalgia, BEST, B.E.S.T, actually stands for something. It doesn't just mean to live an awesome life, although it does mean that too. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about BEST.
BEST, as I use it, as an acronym, and it stands for B is for body, E is for emotions and mental well-being, S is for social support, and T is for transcendence, spirituality. And so it basically is a concise, easy to remember way to talk about a bio, psycho, social, spiritual approach to health and well-being, which is something that has been promoted at various times in our history, in contrast to our current medical system, which tends to divide our body into the various parts. Like we see a doctor for ear, nose, and throat. We see a different doctor for our women's issues, a gynecologist. We see a different doctor for digestive issues. And so that approach divides us into a series of body parts, and it doesn't
Right.
ever really
Everything in
look.
its own little box, right?
Yes, yes. And so our healthcare providers don't look at us as a whole being. And it's really unfortunate because with fibromyalgia, we need all of the resources that we can get. Of course, we need to focus on our bodies and our physical health. We need to do every single thing that we can to combat the fatigue and the poor sleep and the brain fog and the pain. Those are the big four symptoms that characterize fibromyalgia. But sometimes we forget that we have other resources and that we can shore up our emotional and mental well-being. We can develop our social support network to be a stronger system for us. And we can access our sense of spirituality, whatever that means to a person individually, to support us in our journey with fibromyalgia. And when you bring all of that together, you get a synergy that puts people on that positive spiral.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have you noticed any patterns like with your clients? I mean, I know you just said that a lot of us, we're focused on the body because that's the thing
Mhm.
that hurts, right? But have you noticed any sort of patterns with your clients of either areas that are missing or is it kind of different for everybody?
I think what pops into my head right now when you ask that question is that so many of us with fibromyalgia are isolated
Yeah.
and our social support systems are thin. And I think that our social support systems got really disrupted during the pandemic for
Mhm.
everyone, of course.
Mhm.
And that's something that it can be worked on, but it can also be really challenging because when you don't feel well, you don't feel like getting out and meeting new people, and you don't know what to say about your condition because so many people don't understand. And so often, well, for me, for my example is one, I was diagnosed nearly 30 years ago, but I told hardly anyone. I went in the closet with my fibromyalgia basically until I became a coach. I never talked about it with anybody. Now I talk about
Now
it all
you
the
talk about
time.
it all the time everywhere.
Yeah, so I'm making up for lost time. Um, but I had a client who had a really difficult experience with a set of friends, and she was feeling really hurt. And we spent a couple of sessions just focusing on rebuilding her social support network, and we did it really deliberately. We helped her identify who are her old friends, from high school, from college. Yes, they might be all over the country, but with FaceTime and social media and texting, it's easy to reconnect.
Mhm.
And we can also use the pandemic as an excuse. We can say, hey, I'm so sorry we lost touch, but I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. So she started with that. She reconnected with old friends. And then she started reconnecting with some friend groups that were in her city and made some plans with them. And then she and her husband put their heads together to figure out how they could socialize more with some other couples. And she ended up feeling so much better about her social relationships that it actually calmed her body down, because we feel a sense of threat when we're disconnected from people, because as mammals we are designed to be connected. We're designed to live in groups and families and tribes and so forth. And so when we're isolated, we really are at risk, and our bodies respond to that stress. So that's just one example of how you can use that B.E.S.T model to improve your symptoms.
That's such a good example. I know, when when you're an introvert and you end up with, a pandemic or an illness that's isolating, it still of course affects you, but not the same way as somebody who is more of an extrovert, more connected, right? I've had a couple of clients where that was a very key piece of the work that we did because it
Mhm,
was so needed for them,
mhm,
right? It was like
mhm.
food or air.
Yes, yes. And sometimes we dismiss that as not being important, but it really is important to our well-being. And sometimes if I'm feeling particularly bad and having a rough day and I feel myself, just wanting to isolate, I'll say to myself, well, who can I text? Who can I reach out to? Can I reach out for comfort to my pets, or can I talk to my husband? Can I text a friend? And even if I don't get a response immediately, if I send a text, I know that I've been proactive, and that helps me calm down a little bit. It helps me know that I've done something for myself in that moment.
And that's empowering,
It
right?
is.
You have a little bit of that power back of I've
Yes.
done something to help
Yes.
my situation.
Right. And then you can build on that. Each
Yeah.
little piece that you do, then you can say, well, so I reached out to someone. What else does my body need in this moment? And learning to listen to our body is part of self-compassion. And you teach that so well. Um, Asking our precious fibro body, what do you need right now? And maybe you need a cup of tea. Maybe you need to sit outside in the sun. Maybe you need to walk around the block. If you can't make it around the block, maybe you walk to the end of your driveway. And you just take these small steps, because what works for people who don't have fibromyalgia doesn't work for us. We have to take our
No.
goals and break them down into mini goals, to really small micro steps, I call them sometimes. And when you don't realize that that's important with fibro, you can kind of dismiss that and think there's nothing you can do, but there's always something you can do. You can even just walk up and down your hallway if that's all you can do that day. But it helps you feel empowered, like you say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Now, you created an assessment to kind of help people figure out
Mhm.
where they're at with all of this. Why don't you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
It's called the B.E.S.T assessment, and it's put together as a really simple, short workbook. And I've had dozens of people take the assessment, and it just gives them sort of a snapshot in time of where they are. Um, you basically assess yourself on each component on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the best and 0 being the worst. And people are all over the place. Sometimes people are strong on their spirituality and feel like their physical health is terrible. And sometimes it's the opposite. And so then it asks you to identify some small things that you can do to move yourself forward. And
That's great.
it's actually a fun tool. And I think you're going to post a link so that people can access it if they want to.
Yes, yes. We'll actually have that in today's show notes. Go to
Great.
fibromyalgiapodcast.com/135 for today's show notes. We'll also, of course, have a link to where you can go buy Robin's book. The Kindle version is out, paperback is out, and an audiobook, which I am totally jealous of because I don't have an audiobook yet.
It might be in your future.
It
Yeah,
will be in my future.
my daughter Michelle Dollenberg is an actor, and when I found out that my publisher had an audiobook option, I realized that she could do the audio version. As I've gotten older, my voice has gotten kind of hoarse, but when I was younger, my voice sounded very, very similar to my daughter's. So it's really special for me that she narrated the book. And I know a lot of fibro folks prefer to listen to podcasts, to books.
Mhm.
And so that's an option that's available to you. And I think you'll really enjoy it.
That's awesome. I love that it's your daughter that's reading that.
Yeah,
Because
me
sometimes
too.
you listen to an audiobook and sometimes it's the author, and the author isn't that great of an audio recording artist. But sometimes you have somebody who's not the author, and like it's just weird, right? So I think this is going to be fabulous. I think it's going to be as if it was you.
Yeah, I feel that way. It's like you're listening to a younger version of myself.
Yes, I love it. So again, the links to all of this will be on today's show notes. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/135. All right. So as we kind of wrap this up, I would love for you to just sort of talk to the person who's listening. Tell us a little bit about like who you help. I know you mentioned that a little bit, but who you help, the work you do, and then to the person who's listening, who is maybe thinking about writing a book, maybe wondering if they actually can get better with fibromyalgia, those people who are looking to live their best life.
Yeah. So I primarily work with women who, as I mentioned, are 50 years old and better, but I have younger clients as well, and I've worked with the occasional man also. But I think my specialty is working with women in the decades of 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I've even had a couple of clients now that are in their 80s. And what I'm finding is that women feel like they become invisible when they have a chronic illness, but also when we get older, we sort of, it's like we've reached an expiration of our shelf life. And it's really a disservice to women because many, many of us will live into our 90s. I have several female relatives that have lived into their 90s. And we want these decades to be decades of significance. We don't want to be in pain and suffering, um, living those years. We want them to be meaningful. And so that's a major theme of my book, is that you can have a meaningful life with fibromyalgia in your golden years. And I would say that if you're discouraged, if you're wondering if you can get better, the truth is we can help almost anyone feel better because we have so many tools at our disposal. And in fact, just talking with someone who really understands what you're going through, that helps people feel better in and of itself. I say this a lot, Tami, but it's really true. Fibromyalgia coaching is a unique treatment option. It's one part wellness coaching. It's one part health education. It's one part life coaching. And then it's one part peer support, because nearly all of our fibromyalgia coaches have a personal experience with fibromyalgia, or they have a family member with fibromyalgia, and we really get it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We do. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story, both here on the podcast and in your book. There's a lot of personal story in there that is just so wonderful, and just sharing your expertise, the things that you learned the hard way, and to help other people maybe not go through that the hard way. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for writing the foreword to my book. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for you listening, stay tuned. Robin has been on the podcast a couple other times, so I will have those episode numbers next, along with a little bit more information and of course our listener shout out. So hang on. And that wraps up my interview with Dr. Robin Pfaff, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach and Certified Fibromyalgia Coach, and author of the new book, Living Your Best Life with Fibromyalgia, A Compassionate Approach to Reclaiming Your Health and Reimagining Your Purpose. Visit today's show notes for links where you can purchase Robin's new book in paperback, audiobook, and Kindle versions. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/135. And as I just mentioned, Robin has been on the podcast a few times before, and I want to make sure that you don't have to search too far for those episodes. In episode 23, Robin shares about her own fibromyalgia journey, and she goes into a bit more depth, really, than we discussed today. She also talks more about the difference between psychotherapy, counseling, and coaching, specifically fibromyalgia coaching. In episode 41, Robin returns to share her client Lori's story, of course, with Lori's permission. If you've experienced trauma in your past and are curious about how therapy and fibromyalgia coaching can fit together, and if you want to learn more about post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth, this is a great episode. Robin shares Lori's real-life example, including how coaching has helped Lori live her best life with fibromyalgia. As we mentioned in the interview, Robin has created her B.E.S.T assessment to help you assess the 4 areas of your life: body, emotions, social support, and transcendental spirituality. Visit today's show notes to get the link where you can get a free copy of Robin's assessment. Go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/135. And if you are interested in a consultation with Robin, she is one of the coaches available through our Find a Coach page. Just visit findafibrocoach.com, or again, on today's show notes page, we'll have a link where you can schedule online with Robin, one of our students, or one of our other coaches. And now I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This is an email that I received from a listener in Norway. Sigrun says, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your work. I found the Fibromyalgia Podcast 3 or 4 weeks ago and have already listened to a lot of the episodes. I am reading your books now. I get so much inspiration from you. I am really ready to put in the work so I can get better soon. Thank you so much for that, Sigrun. And yes, absolutely. You bring up such a good point. We got to put in the work if we want to see the results. It is not about just listening to the episodes. It's not even about going out and buying and reading the books or downloading the books and reading them. It is about doing the work. It's about implementing the things that you learn. And if you are able to do that on your own, awesome. If not, that is exactly what our coaches are here for. Sometimes it can be really helpful to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and help you figure out how to implement what you're learning into your own life. That's where somebody like Dr. Robin can come into play. So if you are interested in working with a coach, just go to that Find a Coach page, findafibrocoach.com, or visit today's show notes and you can schedule with somebody online. Another really helpful thing for helping you know how to put these things that you're learning into practice is our new Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz. If you haven't taken that yet, I definitely encourage you to do so. I actually recorded an episode explaining what that quiz is all about back in episode 133. So it's just 2 episodes ago. Just go back, listen to that, and go to fibroquiz.com to learn your fibromyalgia wellness style. See y'all back here next time.